Okay, guys, I thought you'd find this interesting since I did one video about the Montauk Project. This is linking Stranger Things, the show, to the Montauk Project. It says, Stranger Things happen from mind control, brainwashing, and monsters. Theories claim Stranger Things happen in real life in a secret government project. Okay? U.S. government top secret Montauk Project allegedly involved kidnapped kids, mind control, experiments, and time travel. Okay? Spine-chilling stories about sinister goings-on at Camp Hero Air Force Base in Montauk have been the stuff of local legend. Okay? Since the 70s, tall tales have surrounded the derelict facility in Long Island, New York. Okay? Most concern the U.S. government's top secret Montauk Project, which, so the story goes, involved with kidnapped kids, mind control, time travel, psychic brainwashing, alien and petrifying otherworldly beasts. If this sounds familiar to fans of Emmy-winning Netflix series hits Stranger Things, that's because the experiments which allegedly took place in Montauk are an inspiration for the show. Stranger Things, which stars Winona Ryder and returned for a second series on October 27th, was originally titled Montauk. But creators, the Duffer brothers, Matt and Ross, ditched the name and transferred the setting to a fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana. They denied to explain why. Okay? And I'm pretty sure that it was because they were getting shit from the government about using the name. Series 1 centered on a missing boy trapped in another dimension, of powerfully psychic girl called 11 who escapes from a secret government research lab, and dark experiments which unleash a terrifying monster that stalks the town. It sounds far-fetched, but has chilling echoes of real-life reports surrounding the Montauk Project, which I included in my first video. Preston Nicholas from Long Island claims he was an electric engineer in Montauk in the early 80s. He said, I found myself on this screwball project, which became known as the Montauk Project. Okay? We began to look at how you could interface with minds with computer systems. The idea being you could fly a higher plane by pure thought, but it soon evolved into developing mind control devices. They wanted to flip a switch and have everybody respond to a computer program. While they never found a signal that worked universally, they were able to target individuals very well. Later, it was discovered that if the individual whose mind was powering the machine could think of other time periods, this machine could generate a vortex there, essentially a time machine. Okay? Which we spoke about, which I spoke about, in the first video. It claimed the Montauk Project grew out of the Philadelphia experiment in 1943, which allegedly was to make the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Eldridge invisible to German radar. Okay? And I said I was going to do a video on the Philadelphia Project, and I will. But conspiracy theories say the ship temporarily vanished into a different dimension or time along with its crew, who later reportedly suffered psychologically damaging effects. Afterward, it is claimed experiments into the uses of electromagnetic forces continued in the government energy lab, Brookhaven in Long Island. In his book, Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, Preston claims that Congress became wary of developing mind control techniques and shut down research. Yet the military took up the baton and allowed scientists to shift their sensitive work to the then deficit Camp Hero. Okay? Which I also mentioned in the first video. So I suggest you watching the first video before you watch this video. Preston said, what better place to disguise the Black Ops secret project than a disused base at the tip of the peninsula, which had always been disguised as a fishing village. Okay? Critically, the former base had an obsolete SAGE radar tower which broadcasted the frequency needed to affect human consciousness. Preston claims the programmings to alter behavior were tested on the locals. He told how 2-hour crime waves would be triggered or teenagers were impromptu to congregate, which others signals caused animals to charge into town or shut down car electronics. Okay? The most sinister of the experiments was the Montauk chair, essentially a mind-reading device. Preston says he operated it. Okay, guys. I gotta go back because it didn't record half the shit that I just read. Unfucking real. Okay. Over time, Preston claims he was able to reclaim his repressed memories and write about what happened. Others have since come forward to talk about their part. Stuart Swirlo, 50, who lives in Michigan, has long claimed he was one of the alleged Montauk boys who was allegedly snatched and used for mind control tests. Stewart said when experiments started, they targeted expendable boys like orphans and runaways or the children of drug addicts, the kind of kids no one would really come looking for. Others have talked of how up to 100,000 boys were subjected to horrific abuse at Montauk over the 13-year period. Stewart said the aim was to fracture your mind so that you can be programmed. They could change the temperature from very hot to very cold. They would starve you, then they would overfeed you. I remember being beaten with a wooden pole. They also loved to hold your head underwater until you nearly drowned. That was effective. It makes a person likely to listen to and obey their rescuer. They also use LSD to put our brains into an altered state. Stewart, who claims some boys died during the project, also alleges that he witnessed sexual abuse used as a torture method. Perhaps the most outlandish of his claims was that these boys were sent down travel tunnels. Stewart, who is now a paranormal researcher, says he went to Mars and back to biblical times. In the early days, as they were perfecting the coordinates, a lot of boys were simply lost. They used other expendable people like homeless people. I still have nightmares about it today. I wasn't there when the Montauk chair was shut off, but I felt like I had suddenly been unplugged from electricity. Given that Stuart Preston and other claims have been from other planets took part in the research, it is easy to see why Montauk Tales developed such a cult following among paranormal enthusiasts. No paper trail has ever been able to be established showing who funded the supposed experiments at Montauk. Of course, there wouldn't be any. In 2015, filmmaker Christopher Garantarno, 40, made his documentary, The Montauk Chronicles. Okay? In Stranger Things, 11 is sent to sensory depriving tank to communicate with this monster that she developed. I grew up in New York, but spent my summers in Montauk. There were always stories of paranormal mysteries. I found them funny and didn't believe them. After film school, I had the idea to make a film and interview some of these men myself. There has been some extraordinary claims made, but the more I have researched, the more I've begun to believe it's not so ludicrous. We know there was a military interest in paranormal phenomenon. Project Stargate, which began in 1978, was later declassified, looked at whether psychics could perform remote viewing and see events from great distances. Okay? Stranger Things focuses on dark experiment which unleash horrifying monsters. Referring to the CIA's mind control program begun in 1953 and halted in 73, he added that MK Ultra used vulnerable people like prisoners. So why is it so far-fetched that orphans or runaway boys would be targeted? They seem exactly the sort of subject who would be easy to take, and Montauk would be the ideal facility in the winter because it's a ghost town. Montauk has not been able to shake this reputation for mysteries. Okay? Paul Monty, 59, who is president of local Chamber of Commerce, says locals don't mind the stories. We all talk about them. I even had my own encounter with an unexplained flying object in the sky over Camp Hero many years ago. No doubt stories have been embellished, and I don't doubt that things went on there in the Cold War years. Even today, the base is patrolled and watched, okay? They obviously don't want people in there even now, okay? Which I find incredibly interesting. Here it says, ocean wave scientists allegedly use radio waves to make World War II destroyer invisible. Some say it moved into a different time or dimension. Radio waves. Frequencies were broadcast to change consciousness and alter human behavior. Crime waves. 2-hour sprees. Mobs of youth induced to congregate. Mind reading. Computer-produced physical items and monsters from people's subconscious. And mind bending. Starved, beaten, fed LSD. Subjects were left with fractured minds. Okay? So, now, being that they're basically saying that the Netflix sci-fi hit Stranger Things strikes similarity to Montauk Project, and it probably is about the Montauk Project. So I think it's pretty interesting. And people have been telling me to watch this, and like I haven't watched it yet, but I will watch the first season as soon as I get a chance to, because if it does have something to do with the Montauk Project, I definitely want to watch it. And guys, I will keep you updated if I find out anything else really interesting. I definitely have to do a video on the Philadelphia experiment, which happened first. So I don't know if I'm missing some important information that would counteract with this project, but I'm going to do a video on that, which is probably going to be a little long, because I'm sure there's a lot of information about that. Like, there's a lot of information about this. If you guys have any questions or comments or know anything you'd like to share about the Montauk Project, please leave it in the comments below or email me. I always love to get you guys feedback, and, you know, if you guys know something, that's great. Share it with me. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again.